Most of the time, when we think about presidents, we think about people who are heavily guarded, whose security is very much heightened, people who are extremely loved in their countries. That's why they get elected, or that is why they remain in power even after their terms. When we think of presidents, we think of these people who are rich and cannot be touched by anyone in the society. Well, sometimes that kind of a thought is broken when an attempt is made at a president, either a sitting or a former president. And this is a story all too familiar recently because in the US we saw an attempt on President Donald Trump. But just on Thursday, the day before yesterday, there was an attempt on an East African president, and that is President Azali Assoumani. President Azali Assoumani was going for a funeral in the outskirts of Moroni. Now, Moroni is the capital of Comoros. Now, in this event, this funeral event of a religious leader who passed on, the president was attending, and in this event there was a man who was wearing an abaya. This is the female garment of Muslims that covers the entire body. Now, this man was aiming at the president, and when he saw the opportunity, he took it. He tried to take the life of the president through the knife, and someone who was just attending the event, not a police officer, we were not told if that person is a police officer, they tried to prevent that man from taking the life of the president. They handled the man and made sure that the president got minimal damage. The president sustained a cut on his hand, while we don't know how the savior or the person who stood in the way of the knife man and the president fared on. We don't have the credible information of how he is progressing, but we know that he was also injured in the process. Well, this perpetrator, the man who was trying to take the life of the president, was caught and taken to jail. He was identified as a person who was in the paramilitary forces in Comoro, but his intent is not clearly known as to why he took that initiative to try to take the life of the president. Well, something that is still a puzzle is that after he was taken to cell, the following day, the man was found dead, lying on the floor of the cell. So the true intention of why he did it is still being investigated, but the perpetrator himself is no more. Well, there are reasons as to why someone can get to this position. There are reasons as to why society might connive to take the life of a president. This man or woman who is loved and adored and who is heavily guarded still undergoes a lot of risks, and that is why you find that there are a lot of security details attached to the president at any given time. Well, to analyze the matter at hand, it is important to go into the leadership of the president, Azali Assoumani, in the past few years and see where this extremism came from. Well, Azali Assoumani, first of all, took over the reins of the power in 1999 through a coup, then stepped down, and then came to be a president again. And the reason as to why a coup leader stepped down is not because he was very generous and wanted to leave power for someone else. This man had to leave power because the constitution at that time clearly documented that a leader has to step down because the three major islands of Comoro had to have a rotational presidency. So when you serve from when you're coming from this particular island and you serve as president, you have to step down and allow someone else from another island to be president and lead the nation. So that was a system of unity to unite these three main islands and make sure that everyone feels represented. But when he took over power, the second time he came into power, the president, Azali Assoumani, changed the constitution and withdrew that aspect of a rotational president. So that those constitutional changes, mostly that constitutional change that happened in 2018, is the one that started to bring up a lot of contention in the country, and is the one that has brewed a lot of extremism or extremist sentiments in the country, because that was a system of unity that united all the three islands and made sure that everyone had their voices heard in the government of the day. President Assoumani also cracked down on opposition and the press. That means that people did not have a way to give their alternative voices. Well, the crackdown of opposition and the press simply is suppressing any dissent from the public, and that builds up the kind of extremist ideas that you find that someone can go to the extent of trying an attempt to a president, because their ideas, their sentiments, their feelings are not being addressed by a government that is supposed to address them. The third possible reason that could have led to the extreme actions of this man were the election irregularities that have been happening in the Comoros. In 2019, there was an election, but this election is said to have happened in a very disorderly way, and that the president, Azali Assoumani, literally stole the elections and did ballot stuffing and everything just so that he can win. And this happened also in 2024, January this year, when there was an election in Comoros. The same thing happened. The president took all measures to make sure that he suppresses the voices of alternative change or alternative leadership so that he can win the election. So that means that he's just doing elections for formality, but at the end of the day, he has to assert power that he has won, and that builds a lot of contempt from the public. Well, the fourth reason was political instability and unrest. There have been political instability and unrest in Comoros, mainly because of the issue of the scrapping off of a rotational presidency. That rotational presidency was the symbol of unity for all the three major islands in Comoro. When it was scrapped, there was political unrest that was met with a lot of force and suppression from the government. And that now is a recipe for chaos, is a recipe for extremist ideas and actions, as was articulated by that man who attempted the life of the president. And finally, the fifth reason is the erosion of democratic institutions. Democratic institutions are very important in any particular society. The judiciary and the legislature are critical arms of government that have to be respected. When a president takes over power and tries to overrun the judiciary by imposing a lot of restrictions and controls the legislature, then they leave the masses with no power. They leave the masses with no channel to voice their concerns and their sentiments about the ongoings of the country. Now, that happened in Comoros, where the president suppressed the judiciary, that it is almost like the judiciary is under the executive and the legislature is under the executive. And that makes it very difficult for people to have justice, for people to have their representatives to say what they need to be said for implementation of laws and particular sentiments that are not in line with the government of the day. Well, that was taken from them, and these are the reasons as to why this man could have taken that unfortunate initiative, that is a criminal offense, of course, to go and try to take the life of the president.